I'm Kaylee, and today I'll be reviewing Mark Eddy Smith's Tolkien's Ordinary Virtues. This is one of my favorite books analyzing The Lord of the Rings. I've already read it once before years ago, and then rereading it this time was like a whole different experience because I actually listened to it on audiobook. This one is narrated by Simon Vance, and I really love his narrative style, so I super enjoyed it reading it the second time around. Before we dive into everything that I love about this book, I'm going to reach back here to our Booktuber Shoutout book, and we're going to shout out somebody randomly. Today's shout out goes to A Book Olive. I'll leave a link to their channel, so be sure to go over and subscribe to them. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up if you love Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And be sure to follow me on Goodreads and Instagram and Twitter and Storygraph and all the places. Why is it that The Lord of the Rings continues to inspire and fascinate generations of readers? I think it's because it mirrors elements of a much larger story, the spiritual story of God and his creation. In this book, we explore different themes found in The Lord of the Rings and see how the virtues of the characters originate, as do all good things, in the virtues of God. This book is full of absolutely incredible commentary on Lord of the Rings. It really dives deep into the parallels and the origins and the themes and connecting threads throughout the story. There are so many marvelous insights into the characters and their individual journeys and how their personalities change and develop. The virtues that are explored are simplicity, generosity, friendship, hospitality, faith, perspective, community, sacrifice, wonder, temptation, failure, atonement, suffering, resurrection, humility, providence, trust, trustworthiness, wisdom, hope, imagination, submission, stewardship, courage, mirth, foolishness, perseverance, celebration, justice, and love. Some of these might not seem like virtues on the surface, but when you dive into the hidden meanings and you analyze the surrounding context, it becomes clear that even foolishness has its place with wisdom in a virtuous life. It's very inspiring because the author always brings it around to how we can apply these moral lessons to our own lives to help us endure and thrive and find meaning in our own story. I really like the way this book is organized. It follows the timeline of the story, starting in the Shire with Bilbo's birthday party all the way to Frodo's last journey into the West. In each chapter, we see a prime example of that particular virtue highlighted at that point in the story. Of course, there are examples of that virtue elsewhere in the story, which are also mentioned, but the biggest archetype of that particular virtue is found at Bilbo's birthday, or in Moria, or at Helm's Deep. So the chapters lead us along that timeline of the story in a natural way, broken up into sections according to the books in the trilogy. This book highlights that no one can have virtue in and of themselves. Even the characters in Lord of the Ring look to higher powers to aid them when they feel helpless to have any courage or virtue by themselves. Multiple times, characters in dire situations called out to Elbereth Gilthoniel for supernatural help beyond the world. And in the same way, we are all incapable of any virtuous behavior or thought unless we rely on the source of all virtue, God. I love that this book emphasizes that stories can inspire us to achieve great things and be better people. Christ used stories to teach his disciples, and Samwise Gamgee, a humble gardener, is inspired to do great deeds because of stories he has heard about elves and grand adventures. He and Frodo imagine that they themselves are in their own glorious story, and they wonder how it will end and whether they will be remembered as great heroes. Similarly, Lord of the Rings inspires us to look at our own lives as part of the larger story of God's creation and hope that we will be remembered as virtuous and heroic. Like Boromir, we can try to make it an ending worthy of a song. Both times that I've read this book, I have given it 5 stars. I love it so much. In fact, I love it so much that I have a lot more things to say about it. So coming up, I'm going to give you kind of the highlights of each of the virtues. This is going to be a long video. So there are spoilers ahead for the Lord of the Rings trilogy and for The Hobbit. So if you haven't watched the movies or read the books, then goodbye and thank you for watching. And for the rest of us, let's continue on and dive in a little deeper. The first virtue that we explore is simplicity. In the beginning of the Lord of the Rings story, the hobbits are living simply and peacefully in the Shire. Just enjoying the simple things of life can be a virtue in itself. Gratitude for our blessings and the simple enjoyment of them can be a way to strengthen us inwardly, because who knows, you might be called on to take a dangerous journey sometime. Simple appreciation for the good and happy things of life can be what inspires us to fight to protect what is good. Generosity. At a Hobbit birthday party, the presents are given to the guests, not presents to the birthday boy. Bilbo is particularly generous because he's trying to work up a momentum of gift giving, so he'll hopefully find it easier to give the ring to Frodo. While Smeagol/Gollum pretended that the ring was his birthday present from Deagle, and even Bilbo lied that he had won the ring in a riddle game, Frodo receives the ring freely, without any of the guilt of murder or lies attached to his conscience. The real gift that Bilbo gives to Frodo is a pure conscience, which enables Frodo to better bear the weight of the ring later on. Friendship. There is no greater treasure in Middle-earth, or anywhere else for that matter, than friends, page 26. This section explores Frodo's complicated relationship with his friends. They are loyal and determined to accompany him on his journey out of the Shire. But he half wishes that they would stay behind. He wants to protect them, but he is also terrified of going on alone. The author points out that Frodo is an orphan, and even Bilbo has left him, so Frodo is afraid of abandonment. And yet Frodo is tempted to abandon his friends when they're all captured by the Barrow Wight. He imagines that he could put on the ring and just escape on his own, until his loyalty urges him to seek Tom Bombadil's help in rescuing them. Throughout much of the trilogy, Frodo is unwilling to accept true friendship from the other hobbits. He's always trying to strike out on his own, but he must learn to trust his friends and accept their help if his quest is going to succeed. Hospitality. The Bible commands Christians to be hospitable, for some have entertained angels unawares, Hebrews 13:2. Farmer Maggot shows hospitality to the hobbits as they flee the Black Riders, offering shelter and comfort without asking awkward questions. Tom Bombadil shows hospitality and gives the hobbits safe passage through his lands, rescuing them twice. Barlaam Butterbur allows the hobbits to stay safely in his inn, even though he knows the Black Riders are looking for them. Every journey needs periods of rest to gain strength for the next leg. Faith. When trouble comes, these small hobbits can only call out for help. They have little strength or wisdom to save themselves. They have faith that something or someone will come to their aid if they just ask for it. Multiple times, characters cry to Elbereth Gilthoniel, one of the angels of Middle-earth who helped Eru, or God, to make the stars. This chapter talks about Elisha from the Bible being surrounded by invisible angelic beings, ready to fight to protect Israel. And similarly, Frodo is surrounded by supernatural help. Even though he cannot see where the help is coming from, he has confidence in the unseen. Perspective. The Council of Elrond goes into a lengthy exploration of the history of the ring to determine what their next steps should be. They need the perspective of centuries of history to be able to see the present clearly and guess at a possible future. The Bible is a book of disturbing, even confusing stories, unpronounceable names, and the terror of God's consuming wrath. It is an ancient document whose history spans thousands of years, but we need to understand it. Page 41. How else can we know how to be saved from our own mistakes, how to navigate the problems of our present world, and how to know the truth of reality? If we don't know our history, if we don't have perspective, then we are completely lost and blind. Community. Unlike friendship, a community is made up of a more arbitrary group of people, randomly brought together by proximity, such as neighbors, or common goals, such as at school or work. The Fellowship of the Nine Walkers are selected by the Council of Elrond to represent all the free races of Middle-earth, men and elves and hobbits and dwarves. Legolas and Gimli, with all their prejudices, would not have chosen to be in the same community. But the community ends up fostering a strong friendship between them. Sacrifice. Gandalf's entire life is a gift to the peoples of the West. Page 48. His entire purpose is to inspire all of Middle-earth to stand against darkness. And Gandalf does not hesitate to sacrifice himself to save his friends from the Balrog in Moria. Even though he's the leader of the Fellowship and could, like a general, keep to the rear of the fighting, he chooses to be in the thick of the battle. And his last words show that his only concern is to protect his friends. He says, "Fly, you fools." This could seem like the height of foolishness because now the Fellowship has lost their strongest guide, and their quest is more precarious. But this is exactly the way that Jesus led. He sacrificed himself so that others could live, and in doing so, he lights a fire in the hearts of others. Page 48. Wonder. Even in the middle of fleeing from Moria and the grief at the terrible loss of Gandalf, Gimli stops to gaze into the Mirror and wonder at the beauty and the history of this very special place. Frodo, Sam, and Gimli cannot see their own reflections in the mirror because it magically only reflects the mountains and the stars. It looks beyond earthly tragedies and problems and sees only what is timeless and untouched. Throughout Lord of the Rings, the characters pause in the middle of dark times to gaze in wonder at the beauties around them. They can begin to find healing and rest from their grief. Page 52. Temptation. In Lothlorien, Lady Galadriel gazes into the souls of each person in the Fellowship, testing their hearts. And later they talk about it and they share what temptation they seemed to see. And they become closer and stronger for sharing their temptations with each other. In some ways, temptation can be a good thing because it shows us where we are strong or weak, and it gives us a chance to overcome and find the joy in overcoming our darkest impulses. Temptation, successfully overcome, strengthens the will. Page 55. Failure. Gandalf was a crutch in many ways. Page 56. The other members of the Fellowship rely on Gandalf so much that they don't discover their own abilities and strengths until he is gone. Suddenly, they have to stand on their own 2 feet, make their own decisions, rely on their own wisdom, and they finally begin to grow. Aragorn especially grows into his kingly self, and he becomes the leader that he was meant to be. But he makes a lot of mistakes. He fails again and again, but he learns from his failure and grows wiser. When Frodo and Sam go into the East by themselves and the Fellowship is broken, a total failure. But failure is only the beginning of a new road. Atonement. Boromir. Enough said, done. Boromir is the poster child for redemption in Lord of the Rings. His betrayal of Frodo, his repentance and confession to Aragorn of what he had done, and his death in attempting to protect Merry and Pippin absolve him of his sins and make his life and death worthy and honorable. But this chapter actually brings out another aspect of atonement, working it out through your life, not through an honorable death. Aragorn feels completely inadequate to lead the Fellowship. He has utterly failed to protect those under his charge, and he atones for his mistakes and casts off the doubts that he's been laboring under by running to the rescue of Merry and Pippin. He must go without sleep for days, running and tracking until he can work out that guilt laid on his soul. Atonement is hard work. What is less widely recognized is that atonement is also a great joy. Page 66. Although they don't actually save Merry and Pippin, the three hunters are purified by their strenuous ordeal. Suffering. It is through suffering that we learn who we really are. Page 67. Pippin and Merry have hitherto just been luggage in the Fellowship, along for the ride, but of no actual help to the quest. But as they suffer at the hands of their captors, the orcs, Merry and Pippin must rise to the occasion, finding depths of courage and resourcefulness, and it prepares them and gives them the confidence to be the soldiers of Rohan and Minas Tirith later on. Suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not disappoint us. Romans 5, 3-5. Resurrection. There are a lot of themes of resurrection at this point in the story, not just the reappearance of Gandalf from beyond the grave. King Theoden is brought back from a spiritual death, resurrected from lies into truth, reclaiming his true name and his true role as king and father. Treebeard is asleep in complacency until Merry and Pippin arrive like a whirlwind, telling him the truth of the outside world and the plans of the dark enemy. And they resurrect the might and the strength of the Ents who go to war against evil. The main thing that is proved in these examples is that we cannot resurrect ourselves. We cannot wake ourselves up. It takes an outside influence to dispel the lies and awaken our hearts. And Christ, the resurrected one himself, is the only one who can do it. Humility. Humility, at least in part, is the act of giving and receiving true names. Page 74. Humility is accepting who we are really created to be, not in pride, thinking ourselves greater than we are, or in shame, hiding from our true self. Gandalf acknowledges Aragorn's true role as the king by giving him the Palantir, although as a powerful wizard, he could have claimed it for himself. At Orthanc, Theoden resists the lure of Saruman's silken voice by knowing his own humble role. He is not tempted to join Saruman, and he says, "A lesser son of greater sires I am, but I do not need to lick your fingers." He knows the balance of his role. He may be a lesser son, but he's not a servant of such as Saruman. Providence. God has chosen weakness to represent him. In his arsenal of weaknesses, one of his chief weapons is providence. Page 78. A small hobbit cannot be expected to do much to change the course of events in the world. But Merry and Pippin end up instrumental in the hands of Providence. They seem to arrive just in time to influence the Ents, or Éowyn, or Faramir, key players in the grand events of the age. Even the failures of the company are used to further the quest and bring people to the right place at the right time for unforeseen purposes. In the middle of desperate circumstances, we cannot know how Providence might be at work in our own lives to orchestrate some great good. Trust. Frodo decides to trust Gollum with his secret quest. Being trusted with another secret makes us feel honored and befriended. It builds up our soul, showing us that we're not alone in the burdens we have to carry. Frodo's trust has an immediate effect on Gollum. Page 85. Smeagol is buried somewhere inside Gollum's psyche and begins to resurface, and Smeagol has a chance, a choice. Even if you threw away that chance for redemption, it shows that Frodo, in offering that compassion and having the faith to trust, is ultimately untouched by the evil influence of the ring. Trustworthiness. Sam and Frodo wonder whether Faramir will prove to be trustworthy. Sam does not have even a tiny fraction of Gandalf's wisdom in his head, but in his heart, he is Gandalf's equal. Perhaps the only such equal Gandalf has in Middle-earth, page 88. In the end, they decide to trust Faramir, and he proves his quality to be the very highest. Frodo proves to be trustworthy as well when he saves Gollum from being killed at the waterfall. But Gollum still feels betrayed. He has done the best he could in a difficult situation, and his conscience is clean. It is far more important to be trustworthy than to seem trustworthy, a lesson he learned from a lanky man named Strider long ago, page 89. And of course, Sam is the ultimate example of trustworthiness. He is faithful to Frodo and the quest through thick and thin. Sam's mind was occupied mostly with his master, hardly noticing the dark cloud that had fallen on his own heart. It is through serving others and proving our trustworthiness that we can alleviate our own struggles and find meaning. Wisdom. True wisdom is the ability to see things as they really are, page 93. One advantage that good has over evil is that the good who are wise can understand evil, for they accept the evil within themselves. But the evil, in turning away from good, in rejecting whatever is good within them, come to believe that there is no good, except that which benefits themselves, page 93. Wisdom is not so much about intelligence or the ability to strategize or see all possibilities. It is about the heart, page 94. Sam unwittingly reveals his master's secret to Faramir. But as Faramir tells him, your heart is shrewd as well as faithful, and your heart saw clearer than your eyes. Hope. Hope is not a feeling, it is a choice, page 97. Even in the depths of Mordor, Frodo and Sam choose to have hope. They choose to keep going, even when their quest seems impossible. They just keep taking that next step in front of them because they believe in something greater than themselves. At the crossroads, Frodo and Sam see a crown of flowers on the broken statue of the king, and it gives them hope. Even in the midst of despair, we can still choose to carry on, and there is no greater hope than that. Page 97. Imagination. Imagination is the whole point of Middle-earth. Page 99. Frodo and Sam sit at the entrance to Shelob's lair, and they imagine that they are in a story. It inspires them to go into the cave, even though danger is waiting for them inside. Are there not enough heroes left in the world? Become one yourself, page 100. If we can imagine what is possible, then we can put it into action in our own lives. No wonder Frodo's story inspires so many people just to get out of bed in the morning. I know it inspires me. Submission. Merry submits to the authority of King Theoden, pledging his life to be a soldier of Rohan. Pippin pledges himself to be a guard of the citadel in Minas Tirith, submitting to the steward. Nevertheless, neither hobbit is truly serving the men, but what they represent: glory, honor, and stewardship, page 103. But Merry and Pippin are not so submissive as to actually obey orders. Merry boldly rides to battle after being told to stay meekly behind. And Pippin defies all kinds of laws to save Faramir from being burnt alive. Because they dare to render their service to a higher good than human authority, Merry saves Éowyn, Pippin saves Faramir, and the two might otherwise have died before they met. Page 104. The Bible says, it is better to serve God rather than men. Acts 5:29. Submitting to God is the highest good and the greatest joy that any human being can attain. Stewardship. Gandalf tells Denethor, I am also a steward. Gandalf is a steward over all Middle-earth, charged with protecting all that is good in the world. The value in things comes from their creator, and a creator who will sacrifice himself to protect and redeem them bestows on them an immense value. Aragorn brings healing and restoration to Minas Tirith, accepting the responsibility to be a steward and administrator of all that has been placed in his keeping. Just as Christ brings healing and restoration to us, saying, "Neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. My Father which gave them me is greater than all." John 10:28 and 29. Courage. Aragorn says of Merry, "He knows not to what end he rides, yet if he knew, he still would go on." Merry has gradually built up endurance through the suffering he has undergone, and now he knows his own mettle, or at least he hopes he has some mettle to show. Pippin stands on the walls of Minas Tirith, watching the darkness descend, watching horrors unfold down below. It takes courage even to witness such things without losing hope. Page 112. Courage is ordinary virtues pushed to extremes. It is their faithfulness, their hope, and their friendship that gives the hobbits the fortitude they need in the face of terror. Mirth. Laughter eases the heart and has a wonderful power of healing. Page 114. When Merry is brought to the houses of healing after the battle, Aragorn says his hurt is grievous, but these evils can be amended, so strong and gay a spirit is in him. There is a free mixture of grief and happiness in Lord of the Rings. It's not all tragedy and it's not all comedy. At some of the most tragic moments of the book, characters break out into grim laughter. When Pippin is nearly crushed by a troll, he laughed a little within him, almost gay it seemed, to be casting off at last all doubt and care and fear. Even facing his own death, Pippin finds some spiritual mirth, happy to be contemplating his eternal destination. Evil is grievous, and loss cannot be laughed at. And God shares our grief, and our loss is his own. But his mirth is nonetheless eternal and undiminished. Page 115. Foolishness. God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. 1 Corinthians 1:27. At the moment when the fate of Middle-earth is hanging in the balance, Aragorn and his friends decide to foolishly advance upon Mordor instead of staying safely and wisely in Minas Tirith. They gamble everything on Frodo and Sam, the smallest and weakest of their friends. Jesus chose simple, uneducated fishermen to be his disciples. He foolishly allowed Judas Iscariot to be one of those close students, knowing that Judas would one day betray him. And he diminished his own power and allowed himself to be killed on a cross, always with a larger plan in mind. God's ways do not always seem to make sense or be wise, but his ways always work. Perseverance. Sam is Gollum's complete opposite, and yet they are very much the same. They have the same devotion to Frodo, the same indomitable spirit, and the same inner dialogue with despair. Page 122. Their perseverance brings them both to Mount Doom, Sam trudging up with Frodo on his back, and Gollum crawling up with murder in his heart. Frodo and Sam's struggle to get up the mountain is pitiful and moving. The mountain seems to pit its will against them, but somehow they find the inner strength to keep going. The greatest weapon in the struggle to not give up and die is cheerfulness. Page 123. Sam keeps his spirits up and keeps his focus forward and encourages Frodo with cheerful hope for the future after their task is done. Celebration! A musician sings the song of Frodo of the Nine Fingers and the Ring of Doom. Surrounded by their friends, they laugh and cry until their hearts, wounded with sweet words, overflowed, and their joy was like swords. At the end of their quest, the celebration is natural, But there are times of celebration even in the worst moments of the story. Sam looks up from the wasteland of Mordor and sees a single star through a break in the clouds. The thought pierced him that in the end, the shadow was only a small and passing thing, and there was light and high beauty forever beyond its reach. In the middle of dark times, there's always something to celebrate. Our sojourn through this land of shadows serves to purify our eyes so we can fully appreciate the glory and purpose of the final celebration. Page 127. Justice. Justice is the virtue of rendering unto others their due. Page 129. Aragorn doles out justice and mercy in equal measure at the beginning of his reign. The enemies who surrender are forgiven, and Aragorn makes peace with neighboring countries, and he gives a merciful sentence of exile to Beregond, making him a captain of Ithilien. True justice leads to healing. Page 132. When Frodo returns to the Shire to find it in shambles, he chooses to mix mercy with justice and spares Saruman's life. Justice comes to Saruman in another form, keeping the hobbits pure from having to deal with him. But this doesn't mean that all injustices are magically rectified. Frodo still has scars, and the Shire is not quite the same again. His maimed finger, I expect, like the wounds of Christ, will remain with him forever as testimony to his deeds. Page 133. Love. Many great tales have a major character who is a Christ figure, someone who exemplifies some aspect of the Savior. But The Lord of the Rings has many. Page 137. In the romance between Arlen and Faramir, love is the ultimate source of healing. Page 137. After years of living under the influence of Grima, who filled her ears with lies, the truths that Faramir speaks to Éowyn transform her. Page 137. Then the heart of Éowyn changed, or else at last she understood it. In all its fierceness and fondness, foolishness and freedom, the love between friends is the root and branch that links Middle-earth with highest heaven. Page 138. And there you have it. Those are all of the ordinary and I think extraordinary virtues of the Lord of the Rings that are explored in this book. As lengthy as I know this video probably is, I have only barely touched the surface of all the little nuggets of wisdom and insight that are included in this book. There is so much more that I could talk about, but you really just need to read the book for yourself. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and this deep dive into the virtues that are exemplified in the characters of Lord of the Rings. Please leave me a comment and let me know what is one of your favorite characters in Lord of the Rings and what virtue do you think they exemplify. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and remember the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.